Hello viewers at home and welcome yet again to another episode of Dinner Guide. My name is Chef Andy and as usual I've always got something up my sleeve. As you can see from behind me, we have been doing some redecorating, which of course I'm hoping you're all going to enjoy as well. On this particular episode, I'm going to be taking you on a beautiful journey where we're going to be making something very local to most of you, something very practical to most, and maybe even for some it may be a new experience. We're going to be doing some omena, some brown ugali, and some sauteed spinach and cabbage. But before we get that far, I'm going to start by introducing the ingredients before us today. And right from the front, I have some red onions there. I've got some brown flour there, a bit of some omena there that's dried. I've also got some baby spinach, a bit of some cabbage there, some fresh coriander, some freshly chopped tomatoes, and of course 1 cube there that is a beef cube. I'm also going to be using just salt and pepper for seasoning, and I'm going to be using olive oil as my choice of oil for this particular recipe. So if you're going to be taking some notes particularly for this episode, this is your chance to grab your pens and papers, and when you come back we're gonna just go right into this very simple and beautiful dish. So stay tuned, we'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are with us just before the break, we've just finished introducing the ingredients before us today, and I'm going to start off by heating up our water, which we're going to be making our ugali in. So you may actually want to give that just a few minutes to heat up, but while that continues, I am going to jump into the next part of the dish, which is to make this beautiful omena. Now, particularly in Kenya, most of you may know that this is very common among the Luo community, but it has actually had a bit of twists and turns along the way, and you can actually be able to make much more of the same thing in very different ways. On this particular episode, I am only going to be focusing on the basic one, which is the saute method. So we're going to start by heating up our pan. And something also to remember omena is a very particularly common dish, and it actually comes dry, as you can be able to see them. Something to watch out when you're buying your omena: always make sure that it's nicely perfectly dry if it's not actually fresh. Always also check for the smell. Make sure it does have quite a nice bland smell. It shouldn't smell like refuse or anything that is unpleasant to the nose. And another thing as well, always be sure to make sure that you buy it as fresh as you possibly can. Remember, it is dried, but always work with the freshest batch that you can get out there in the market. And clearly you all know that there's so much more of this that are out there. So one thing to particularly make sure before working with omena, always make sure for the freshness, smell it, make sure it's nice and crispy when it's dry. It shouldn't be soggy. Otherwise, you may actually not get the same thing that you're looking for, or rather the results that you're looking for. So we're going to start off nice and simple. Drizzle a bit of oil on a pan, about 1.5 tablespoons. Give your pan a few minutes to heat up. And we're basically just going to start off by frying this. Remember, they are dry. We do actually need to reconstitute them. And by reconstituting, I mean to try and rehydrate them, so that they are a little easier to chew and a little better on the palate. So our pan is hot. We're going to start off by adding in our omena to the pan, and using a spoon, just proceed to give that a quick mix. So basically this stage is only a matter of really just hydrating the omena. I have actually had a few questions on occasion whether it's actually advisable to soak them in water. I would say if you're thinking of soaking them in water, you may actually be planning to make something similar to a dressing, which will actually need them to be blended and crushed, so that would make sense. But if you are going to be just frying them directly, you can actually start with them as dry as they are. So you may actually notice my pan is smoking a little bit, and it's actually the result you're looking for. So we're just going to switch pans and just allow that to continue to just hydrate on the pan there. Remember, it's very, very dry when it comes in from the market, and it will actually soak up most of the oil that you put into the pan. I will recommend don't add any oil, particularly at this stage. First, hydrate your omena. Start by mixing up all the other condiments, cook them down, and then add the omena last, because it is actually pre-prepared. So I'm just going to reach out for a plate on the side, and we're just going to pour those onto a plate and allow them to cool off for just a few seconds. Just going to leave those there. And in the meantime, I'm just going to take you to the pot right at the end there, which we're going to be doing our ugali in. Very, very basic. Two things that you may require to know about ugali. It does vary with consistencies wherever you travel in the country. If you're traveling more towards the western part of the country, you may find that it's actually more dry and a little more cakey and very, very dry. But if you come down towards the central part of the country, you may actually find that the consistency may change. So we're only going to be doing this just for demonstration purposes, but I do recommend, if you do like your ugali a certain way, feel free to continue to prepare it just the same. So first things first, water is boiling. We're going to add that into the water and just proceed to mix everything together, making sure to keep your motion consistent. And this will allow for your ugali mixture to really just blend in really well with the water. It will also help you, especially when you're trying to get rid of those lumps of flour that are in there. That is the only trick I could probably share with you at this stage. But very, very importantly, always try and make sure to really work with the measurements. I know some of you may actually have a difficulty in trying to weigh out flour versus water ratios. If you do turn to the back of the ugali packet or the maize meal packet that you purchase in your regular retail stores, you will actually see some instructions maybe to one side of the packet or to the back. So you can actually work with those, and you should actually get a very, very good product at the end of the process. So we're just going to start finishing this off. So particularly with ugali, it's not a very, very difficult dish, especially if you do take some time to practice to make ugali. So I will recommend, the only secret to this is practice, and practice does make perfect. All right, so I'm going to keep mixing that through. Of course, making sure to break up any lumps of flour that you may be able to see right from the top of that mixture. Remember to also keep folding in as you continue. This will actually help you to really reconstitute that flour. So a few more turns should do it. You will actually begin to notice that it will actually start to dry off slowly as it continues, and it will start to really come to its consistency that we're looking for. Right, so first things first, done. We are going to give that just a few minutes to cook through. But while that continues, I am going to get another pan going on the side. And to that, you will begin first by adding a bit of oil. And I'm using virgin olive oil for this recipe, particularly for the fact that it is actually healthy. And for some of you who may not be able to actually acquire some of the tools or ingredients I'm using on the show, you can actually substitute that for vegetable oil. It will actually give you a very, very good desired result. So begin by swirling your pan around. Sorry for that. Swirl your pan around, making sure to cover the surface completely with oil. And we're going to proceed to chop our onions. So very, very simple. A few slits right over the top as always. Cut across once, almost to the end, and begin to chop everything finely. Once you get to the very end, turn it sideways and finish off by chopping it to the same size. And we're just going to add that straight into our hot pan. Be sure to always also watch out for that sizzle. It does really make a difference when you actually allow your oil to heat up. First of all, it does cook out the properties that actually really raise the calories in our bloodstream. So very importantly, when you're cooking, give your oil a bit of time to heat up. It will actually make a difference in the end. So using a wooden spoon, I'm just going to begin mixing that in the pan. And just allow that to really just sweat out and get a bit of coloring. While we do that, we're gonna come back to the ugali mixture. Now that the consistency is just about right, I'm going to now proceed to move that onto another plate. So I'm just going to use the bowl right next to me here. And all we are going to do is just pour that out. And remember, this will actually cool down and eventually it will actually get to its perfect consistency. So don't be too worried about the consistency at the beginning. And another thing also to mention is, remember, the variations of the flour do come in different types. So this particular one actually has a very good content of cassava flour to brown flour, which actually gives it a nice, beautiful finish, a nice, beautiful taste, but the consistency might vary just a little bit. So it's actually something I would love to share with you. There's plenty of flour out there you can try and work with at home, and cassava flour is a particularly good one, very commonly used towards the western part of the continent, and it's actually very nutritious as compared to maize meal. So just to bring you back to where we were, our onions are now nicely golden. Next up, we're gonna add our tomatoes. Now we're going to bring our heat a little higher, and we're just going to toss everything in the pan together, allowing that to really come to the heat. Next up, we'll also be incorporating a bit of some stock cubes. So this particular technique actually really helps in flavoring your mixture, flavoring your dish. And particularly for those of you who may not have this next to you, you can actually work with fresh made stock, whether vegetable, chicken or beef stock. It will actually do just the same thing. Right, so just about half of a beef cube. Just add that in there and reserve the rest. And proceed to mix everything together with your spoon. And just proceed to saute everything together, giving your tomatoes a bit of time to break apart as well. And if you are particularly looking also for different consistency to your dish, you can also alternatively throw your tomatoes in the blender. You can actually blitz them a little bit to get a runny consistency, and it will still just do the same thing. Now the reason for me chopping my tomatoes a little bigger, first of all, there is a nice beautiful trick to really getting a beautiful consistency to your food. And particularly with tomatoes, remember, big chunks may take a little longer to break apart, but it will actually give a very beautiful consistency at the end. So just proceed to fry those at high heat. And of course, always continue mixing your mixture, making sure that it doesn't start to overcook. Right, now that you have your chunks nice and ready, we're actually going to add just a bit of liquid to the mixture. This should actually be able to break the tomatoes a little faster. So just about a tablespoon of water will do at this stage. So this will actually just steam up your pan. It will help you to also reconstitute most of the flavor that's on the pan. And you can also use stock in place of water. It is actually a little more nutritious and it will work to your advantage. Right, now once your tomatoes are nicely almost pureed up and they're now just starting to break, and you can be able to start noticing that the skin and the flesh of the tomato starts to separate, you can proceed to grab your omena. Just add that to the pan and proceed to mix everything together once more. And by this stage, you should actually be able to have a beautiful fishy aroma coming through the room. Right, so we're just going to give that just a few minutes to continue. In place, I'll just clear my station really quickly. I will actually hold on to some water here. It will actually help you really break those tomatoes a little faster at high heat. But one trick to this, you don't want to add too much at once, so about a tablespoon per portion is actually a very, very good recommended way to break those apart. And it will actually give you quite enough humidity on your pan for you to really tenderize your omena that's already dried up. And it will actually also build with the flavors as you continue to cook. Alright, nice, beautiful, dry consistency there. It's not so dry, you can actually be able to see a bit of grease at the bottom of the pan. Add a little bit of water once more and proceed to mix everything together. And now once you've incorporated just about a half cup of water to your mixture, it should actually continue to dry out a little bit more. This is now the best time to actually begin to season your dish. So I'm going to add about half a teaspoon of salt. Also going to add some grounded black peppercorns. You can also use some powder black pepper if you can actually get some as well. And ladies and gentlemen, your sauteed omena is easily done. As I said, it has already been dried. It's actually very, very fast cooking. And even by the look of it, you can be able to see that beautiful color. You should actually be able to feel the change in consistency from your wooden spoon while you continue to cook. And once that is ready, we're just going to move that onto a plate. Just turn down your heat real quick. Give it one quick mixture and proceed to add that, to move that to a plate on the side, which should actually allow for you to cool it a little faster and avoid it from overcooking. And now we're going to put another pan back onto the heat. Be sure to add a bit of oil in there. So now next up, we're going to start by doing our vegetables. Our ugali is done, our omena is done. So last but not least, the vegetables. One particular beautiful secret to dealing with vegetables, always cook them lastly before you actually after doing everything else. It will actually help for the freshness at the table. It will actually not lose its crispness. And if you're actually looking for a bit of color and a bit of appearance compliments from there, you should actually be able to get those if you follow this very, very simple trick. So very, very simply, as I said, we're going to be working with some cabbage and we're going to be working with some baby spinach. So our cabbage is already nicely finely chopped there. So we're going to do the same thing for our baby spinach. We're going to be looking for the same consistency. So very, very simply, just begin by laying your leaves one on top of the other on your chopping board. That should allow for you to actually chop that very, very easily without actually incorporating the stems into the mixture, which you're actually not looking to add into this dish particularly. And that you should actually do that even with regular spinach. So proceed to chop your baby spinach, looking for a similar size to the one you had in the cabbage to make sure for a very beautiful consistency with appearance. And once you get that far, chop up the last little bit of spinach remaining on your stalks, and be sure to discard the rest. Now next up, we're going to start off by adding a bit of our onion. I'm just going to move that to the side. I'm just going to slice us into some half moon sizes. As I said, if you are looking for a bit of appearance, this is a very, very good technique to do so. So very, very quickly into a hot smoky pan, add your onions and then your cabbage. And using a spoon or just the handle of your pan, proceed to toss everything together. And this particular technique allows for you to really have those onions cooked. They do lose that pungency that does give you a bit of a bad breath, especially if you've had raw onions. And they actually maintain that beautiful crispness all the way to the table. All right. Proceed to season with some salt. And some crushed black peppercorn. Give that a nice quick mixture. And now proceed to add your spinach. Of course, always making sure to add your spinach just after the cabbage is slightly cooked. Remember, one particular area we all go wrong, especially cooking, which happens without us knowing. We actually sometimes go as far as overcooking our vegetables. So as I said, this is a very, very beautiful addition to your dish, a very beautiful accompaniment to your omena. And cooking it this way will actually avoid for you to lose most or all of your nutrients while doing so. So just proceed to mix everything together. You can use a tongue or a wooden spoon if you have one. Give that a nice quick mixture. And you can actually turn your heat off completely right at the stroke of 2 minutes. That should actually be able to give you a very, very beautiful crunchiness to the vegetables, and it will actually really retain the beautiful juices that are in there without actually overcooking your cabbage. So one quick mixture before we take it off the heat. So remember, at this stage, I am allowing the vegetables to continue cooking on the hot pan with the heat turned off completely. Remember, the pan does retain quite a bit of heat when you're cooking, and this is a particularly good way to make sure that you actually conserve most of the gas that you're utilizing, and of course allowing your vegetables to cook really, really well, undisturbed and without losing the crisp character that we're looking for. Right, so once your spinach is beautifully wilted, proceed to grab a plate or a bowl and just take that off the pan, and that should be able to slow down the cooking process. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is as easy as it is. So you've been watching us do the omena now. We've done the ugali, and we've just finished with the almost last little bit of detail that we were working on this particular cut. But before we take our break, I will remind you that we are on Facebook. Definitely be sure to tune in. We're always going live at exactly 7 p.m. So be sure to watch out for that. And now, before we take our break, I'm going to remind you as well, you can actually substitute the omena with some dried fish or with some with any other dried fish that you may be able to find. It will actually give you just the same beautiful flavors that you manage to get to the omena. And another thing as well, be sure to go very light on the salt, because omena does tend to be a little salty. So be very, very wary about adding your seasoning. Taste as you continue, and you should be able to get it right. So we're going to take a short break now and clean up our section. And when we come back, I'm going to take you to the last and final stage, which is the plating. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who are just catching up with us, we've been working on some very, very beautiful things before we took the break. We've been doing our brown ugali, we did our omena, and we did our vegetables, and now we're at the last and final stage, which is the plating. So I'm going to start off very easily by plating the ugali. So very, very simple technique to turn that over without actually touching it by hand. You can actually just place the plate you're going to be serving on, and then just turn that around, and that should actually just slide out of your bowl very easily. And now we're going to proceed to add everything else. So I'm just going to take a bit of our cabbage and spinach saute. We're just going to lay that straight to the plate, right over one side. Remember, there's actually a roll to there's actually a system to plating that I will actually explain to you in a little bit. But before I do so, very simply begin by plating your omena. So I'm just going to lay that right at the front there for you to see. All right. So simple as that, a very, very simple omena with ugali, with brown ugali and some sauteed cabbage and spinach. But just to finish that off, always also an important thing to always give your plate a bit of a beautiful finish to it. So I like to particularly just use some coriander leaves for the reason that they're actually fresh, they're edible, and you can actually really, really just depict a bit of flavor once you actually incorporate that into the dish. And that I will just lay right over the ugali like that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my version of brown ugali with omena and sauteed cabbage with spinach. I do hope that you've managed to grasp something that you can be able to use in your very own kitchens at home, and that you've actually learned a few 3 or 4 tips of the trade that you can actually be incorporating from today onwards. Thank you so much once again for tuning in. I will remind you that we are on Facebook. You can actually be able to find most of the shoots we've done on YouTube as well. But we do appreciate your comments, your queries, your compliments, any particular detail that may actually attribute to the betterment of the show. We really thank you so much for coming this far. But until the next episode, where we continue to bring some very, very, very beautiful dishes that you can all try out during this August holidays in your very own kitchens. Thank you for tuning in to BrandPlus TV today. And until the next episode, have a lovely evening and see you soon.